This episode contains stories of trauma related to domestic abuse. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Welcome to It's Your Story to Tell. I am so excited to be talking today with Jana Wilson. And it was so fun to get contacted by her publicist, who asked me if I wanted to read her book, which is it out now, Jana? It came out this month, is that right?
It comes out July 12th.
July 12th. So Wise Little One, you guys, is an amazing book, and I'm so happy to be here with Jana, where we're going to talk about emotional healing and so many other amazing things about her journey. A little bit about Jana. Obviously, she's an author, but she's also an emotional healing educator. She is a meditation teacher, retreat leader, a public speaker, a hypnotherapist, and the founder of Emotional Healing Systems. Has been doing this for 20 years. Is that right, Jana?
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough. So thank you so much for joining me, giving me the opportunity to read your book prior to it being available. I have to say, I went through it. I'm highlighting it and so many great things. What I love about it is not only does it have practical questions to ask yourself, and it's just very easy to read, and it definitely keeps your attention. So I highly recommend it to my audience to check it out. So thank you for joining me today, Jana, and sharing your story with the audience here on It's Your Story to Tell.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Megan.
You are so welcome. Well, let's just jump right in, because goodness, I think we could probably have a multi-series podcast on the amount of content in your book. So as I was thinking about how are we going to cover all of this, because it's so good, but if you will just start and give us a little bit of background on your story so our audience can know kind of where you're coming from, and then we'll go into how you went from that place to where you are today.
Yeah, so I grew up in adverse childhood experiences. There's a test that we give to clients. It's called the ACE test, Adverse Childhood Experiences. There's 10 questions. I scored 10 out of 10. So I had a lot of even, of course, developmental trauma, but precognitive and preconscious trauma as well, intergenerational trauma. So I was, it was a triple whammy for me.
Mm-hmm.
So the story in Wise Little One I'm sharing of really how we're conditioned in our formative years. So for me, it was an alcoholic father, womanizer, a mother who was mentally ill. And it didn't take me too long to start figuring out they didn't really have it figured out. And I lost respect for, many of the adults around me. And it led me on a spiritual journey, because anytime we're in adverse experiences, right, we're challenged by something, there's a push to the light, right? If you're in the darkness, there's a push to the light. If you walk in a dark room, you want to know where's the light switch. Mm-hmm. And so for me, my childhood really woke me up at a young age. And I begin the book with that in the prologue, mm-hmm. an experience I had that was probably the most profound experience. It was the defining moment that really set me in my calling and my dharma, what I'm doing today, which was at 12 years old. I was pulled out of my body and during a domestic violence situation with my mom and dad, and I was praying for help. And the next thing I knew, I was out of my body. I felt a very deep peace and a knowingness that everything was going to be okay. And I was told, those are not your parents. That's not your life. This is. And I felt like I was one with the cosmos, like I was being nestled in this vast expansive universe, and everything was okay. And I remember thinking, am I dead? Because if I am, I'm okay with it. It feels good. So I was going through a lot of suicide ideation up until that point. And I feel like spirit pulling me out of my body really woke me up. So that, set me on this course. Of course, I was in high school and I was still doing the things kids do in high school. And once I went off to college, but I woke up pretty early in my late teens where I was really serious about correcting the childhood I came from, which is why I call myself a cycle breaker.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful. What I think is so amazing about what you shared is that you just had this knowing from this early age. You were in this really difficult place. And even though you knew, you still had so much of your story was still so hard. But do you feel like that having that knowing helped you as you continued to move through those years, that it was still traumatic as I read through your book after that point and after that experience?
Yeah, I mean, once a mind is expanded, it can't return to its original state. So my consciousness had been expanded by that experience. And it was always there under the surface. So, and the way it would show up would just be this knowingness that everything was going to be okay. I had spent my entire childhood where, things were really difficult and then they would be okay. And there would be moments of happiness and contentment, and then it wouldn't be okay again. So I began at a young age to be able to discern that things were impermanent, things were temporary, and not get too attached and too afraid, projecting into the future it was going to get worse. Or, I was really able to stay in the present and accept what was happening, which is a huge piece even for an adult to get, right? So the fact that I was getting that at a young age because of the trauma, I was really clinging to my spiritual resource. And that resource is that still small voice the Bible talks about. But it was my wise little one. It's that part of me, my emotional self, that my essence, right? That innocent core child that was always there with resiliency and strength, urging me on, like, you've got this. And yeah.
In the book, you talk about some different ways that you either had modeled for you to deal with these hard things, maybe the way your mom dealt with it. And I also found it interesting, and probably because I identified in myself a little bit about this fixing things. And I remember this one story that you were sharing, and there was abuse happening. Your dad was pretty violent and throwing things and breaking things, and how you tended to go and start cleaning up, fixing things, trying to put things back into order that were disordered. How did you transition from that? Was that before this incident? And I'm trying to remember in the book, was it before that you had that kind of fix-it personality? Was that something that continued on with you that you've had to work through? I know for me, like perfectionism and putting things into order has definitely been something that I've been challenged with to let go of, because it doesn't really allow you to process what's going on. You're not being present, and it makes it more difficult for me to move forward when I'm engaging in that kind of unhealthy coping mechanism for me.
Yeah. So as a child, when things were broken or whatever, I mean, of course I wanted to create order out of the chaos. And it was, my mom was clinically depressed. So a lot of times she wasn't cleaning the house. I mean, even when there wasn't, a knockdown drag out, and there wasn't, things to pick up and things that were broken, I was always, that's one of the ways we love ourselves. So I'm not talking about the extreme case of perfectionism or OCD, but organization is very important to the inner child. Children thrive in environments where it's organized, it's clean, they have consistency. And so I didn't have that. So I was, even at such a young age, attempting to create that for myself. And certainly I have done that now as an adult. And, you get in my car and it's clean. My home is clean. Things are in order. Things are put in their place. My mom didn't have that ability to do that. So maybe, often we learn what not to do from the parent, right? And so she was definitely showing me, like, what a diseased mind, a chaotic mind looks like. When we keep things on the floor, hoarders, people like that, these are disorders. And mine certainly wasn't a disorder. It was just me wanting to create order out of the chaos.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such a good way of kind of defining that,
or reframing, maybe.
Reframing it, yeah, and being able to say, like, these are actually some really good qualities and strengths and things that we need in our life. For me, I've had to find that balance and make sure that I'm staying in where it's actually healthy versus where it can get too far, where it's not about creating order, but it's about avoidance
controlling
of something.
Or controlling your environment. Because you feel out of control. Yeah. So if you have a fixation, if you have a fixation of that, of perfectionism, then it's probably a controlling, mechanism where you're feeling out of control somewhere. So you're trying, and I did that in my 30s. I would, people would come over, and as soon as they set a glass down, I was cleaning up under it, or I was trying to fix things, but I was still, not really in a healed place, right? I was still trying to figure out my own stuff at that time. But once I realized, our outer world reflects our inner world. Our inner world reflects our outer world. So if I feel out of control and I'm trying to control something in an area, I have enough awareness to say, okay, where am I feeling out of control? Why am I fixating on something? Right. And so that's good. So you do want to reframe it, because it is a positive, unless you're avoiding something, as you're saying, and you're doing it to try to, have some sense of control somewhere because you don't somewhere else.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I love that, because in my own life, I've seen how I've been able to transition, and it's that awareness, understanding kind of the why behind we do things. And when we were talking before, just preparing for the podcast, we were talking about our beliefs and how our beliefs are what create the life that we live. And in your book, you talk about some of the beliefs that you had early on that were limiting. Would you share a little bit about the beliefs that you had to work through, and how do you suggest people identify and then work through their own limiting beliefs?
Yeah. So, disempowering, limiting beliefs, false beliefs really are what they are, because they're not true. You develop them early in developmental years, birth to 7. Really benign events can happen that create this. And I liken it to an operating system on a computer. So if, when we were under the age of 7, a lot of people don't even have much memory, especially if it was kind of boring, not much was going on, what happens is we create these beliefs that don't serve us, and it becomes an operating system, and we default to it, and we attract people and situations and circumstances that keep validating that belief. Mine was, I'm bad. There's variations of them. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm damaged. Even children who don't have really intense trauma right? Like on the adverse childhood experience questions, neglect, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, things like that. They have traumas. A parent who doesn't model good boundaries, who goes through their things, that's a trauma for a child. A parent who doesn't regulate their emotions, they rage, they scream, they snap, that's a trauma for a child. Parents who, kind of the stage parent that live vicariously through the child, that's a trauma for a child. Parents who don't really see or hear the children, because we have these sayings like, children are to be seen and not heard. And so all of these different types of traumas, I don't even like to call them mini or major, they're a trauma to the child. It's like their fingers broken and your arm's broken, and you can't compare, because to each person it's relative, right? So these core false beliefs get formed at a young age. I always remember one client I had, she came to me in her early 40s and she was just kind of dissatisfied with life. She had this reoccurring complaint. So this is usually how you can identify what yours is, because you'll hear yourself saying it. Like she would say, no one ever listens to me. That was her, always saying it. Her husband would say, I do listen to you. I do. No, you never hear me. So whatever we're saying is normally what we're doing to ourselves, because it's in our awareness. So essentially what she was saying is, I don't listen to me. I don't hear me, right? My feelings don't matter. And so that was her core false belief. When you really need the help of like a hypnotherapist to get to that memory, because often people don't have the memory of what it was. For her, she was 5 years old. She was on a vacation. They were all swimming in a lake. She had never been in a lake. She was afraid to go in it because she couldn't see the bottom. She was begging and pleading, don't make me go in the lake. They made her go in the lake. And in that moment, she decided her feelings don't matter, because had they mattered, then her parents would have listened to her and let her get in the lake in her own time, or maybe not at all. Right. Like, who cares? But so she decided, my feelings don't matter. And then it changes your worldview. So her worldview shifted at that point too, to the world. Other people know better than me. So that she was always giving herself away. She was a people pleaser. She was a doormat, but then she would get passive aggressive and resentful. So her relationships were really suffering. And it was all because she had this operating system, a major virus. She needed a big upgrade. And my feelings matter. My feelings matter. Right. And once she began to, it's really cognitive behavioral therapy, change the thought, my feelings matter, it begins to solidify, because all a belief is a practiced thought. And so she began to think this new thought, and then eventually her behavior began to change, and she would speak up for herself. She would advocate for herself. She would say no sometimes. She stopped being a doormat and the people pleaser. She stopped being a caretaker. So therefore she wasn't attracting dysfunctional relationships, codependency, because she had changed her core false belief. So this is root cause therapy, not top-down therapy, right? This is getting to the nitty-gritty of, why am I behaving and why am I unhappy in my life? And it's always comes back to these limiting beliefs.
Yes. I share a very kind of similar story, a different experience. And I was more in the age of 7 that created this belief very similar to what you were just describing. And I continued to bring in this dysfunction. I was codependent, people pleaser, achiever. And I went to a lot of counseling and I was getting nowhere. And it wasn't until I had somebody who helped me understand exactly what you just were sharing. And I was able to go back to the memory and find where that became programmed. And when I was then back in that memory, I was actually able to speak to my mini Megan and let her know, no, you were upset and sad, and that was valid. Like, you watched a sad movie and you have such a soft heart, and the way they responded to you was not appropriate. And when I was able to do that, it allowed me then to start going into a lot of other memories and seeing where this belief was playing a role, where I was able to give myself compassion because I had so much shame over how did I end up here in my life. And I was really disappointed in myself. But when I was able to realize that there was something outside of me that occurred, it helped me to also release that shame and then be able to start reprogramming that. And you were saying repeating that over and over, and that is definitely something. I had to find affirmations. For me, it was scripture. I wear a bracelet. I have tattooed, like things that are reminders about my worth and who I am. But it took a lot of work to become conscious of that, and then taking those thoughts captive and then speaking truth to them. And then as I was able to do that, my life began to change and shift and become so much more fulfilling. So what the work that you do there is so amazing and so powerful. So if people are feeling like I've been trying so many different things, I would say try this, because this for me, and I know a lot of people, really unlocks freedom.
Yeah, I mean, everybody. It's not just some people, because everybody's operating from beliefs, and until you unpack what those beliefs are and if they're serving you or not, a lot of people come to me and they're like, I didn't come here to change my beliefs, and they might be talking about their religion or, but really, essentially, if though it always requires, because life is going forward, we're evolving, we're, hopefully progressing, there's no perfection, but we're progressing. Right. Progress, not perfection. We want to be upgrading ourselves. If your beliefs were working, then you would be happy, you would be content, you would be filled with faith, you'd be trusting. It would reveal itself. And when it's not, it comes back to, and they're in our subconscious mind and we're not aware. So you usually need help. Like when I was in my 20s, I would we had Walkmans back then, and I had a cassette, and I had recorded my voice repeating, like you said, I am worthy, I am a child of God, I am deserving, I am lovable, just over and over and over. And I would go to sleep listening to that, because I felt so worthless. I felt so insignificant. But the more I could attach to this idea that I was a child of God, that's where it all started. Then certainly if I'm a child of God and God lives and moves and breathes through me, then I am one with, Spirit. Jesus said it. I and the Father are one. The kingdom of heaven is within. So I began to see that I had everything I needed within me. It wasn't outside of me. So the real work was the internal work. But this is the problem, because the world's always distracting us and getting our attention, and somebody has the answer. Somebody has, and it's a lie. The answers are all within us.
I love that. And that is how, when I coach, and I think that was a big shift for me when I was working with this other person after have gone to counselors where they were sitting there. I felt like they were the expert, and they needed to tell me, what do I do next? How do I do this? And it wasn't until I started being challenged, like, you need to look inside you. You're the expert. You have God, you have spirit. Like, what is it saying? Because I do think we hear that still small voice, and then we start ignoring it, and then it gets softer, and you have to really then go back and turn your ears back on, because you have silenced your own ability to hear that still small voice. And when I did that, it was so empowering. So I just love what you're saying because it transformed my life. And it sounds like your life,
Megan,
and all of these people that you, yeah.
Yeah. And Western medicine is not, I just finished working with a psychotherapist. I work with a lot of clinicians. My husband's a physician, and we have retreats called Healing the Healer. They are not taught, psychotherapists are not taught in the model that we have now to teach someone. Think about it. If they begin to teach you and how to help yourself, you're not going to come back. So where are they going to get their money? They can't bill insurance. They can't bill anybody if they're getting you healthy. So we have a sick care system in every area, but definitely also in psychotherapy. You know, it's again, top-down therapy. You go, I'm not feeling good, I'm depressed, take a pill. You know, they don't talk about, well, what could be the root cause of this? Then you go to psychotherapy, you've got maybe 50 minutes, an hour, you know, as soon as it goes off, okay, done. It doesn't matter if you're mid-sentence, out the door, next patient's coming in. There's not enough time. Just to do a hypnotherapy session is 2 hours. Yeah. So, you know, to really dig deep with a client and help them unpack their history, you know, the decisions they made about themselves, all those false beliefs and everything takes time. It takes slowing down the linear mind, past, present, future. It takes, you know, getting in a really relaxed state. And, you know, it's just not set up that way, you know, unfortunately.
I'm so glad you said that because you know, my background is a nurse. I worked in the hospitals. I worked in so many different aspects. I was very frustrated with the system because I got into being a nurse because I wanted to see people get healed and be healthy. And after 21 years, I had to do something different because they're like, this, we're just cycling people through broken people, broken, and give them a pill, get a, you know, oh, sure, their blood pressure, but they never get to actually achieving health. And then we just have to up the medication. And it was making me so sad. And so, also angry, like this is not what I want to be doing, and went into functional medicine and then coaching and all of this, where it's looking at the whole person, mind, body, spirit. We are all of these in one, and we can't really work on one without the other. And you're right, it takes time, it takes investment from a person who says they want to change, where a lot of times when we've gone into the doctor and we've had a pill and it's like, well, my blood pressure did go down, then you kind of like, do I really need to do that hard work, or can I just get something else? And so we've created a situation where hard work is not something people want to sign up for either. We want the quick fix in this world. And this work that you're talking about is not a quick fix. And you have to be invested in yourself and really want to change. And then when you do, there's all kinds of resources that can bring you to a much more free place, and a place where you are thriving and who you're designed to be. One of the
reason why people aren't, you know, taking responsibility is because most people lack discipline. So we have a nation, you know, full of obese people who aren't, you know, loving themselves. Jesus said, you know, I leave you with 2 commandments, love your neighbor as yourself. I've never been to a church where they taught me to love myself. So, you know, I'm definitely not one for organized religion. I am a spiritual being having this human experience. To me, my relationship with Christ is a state of consciousness. It's not something that I do in the outer world to show people right? It's a path that I walk daily. And making spirit more real than the material world takes discipline. I get up, the first thing I do in the morning is meditate, which is really brainwashing, clearing my mind. It's spiritual hygiene. I wouldn't think of leaving my house without brushing my teeth. So why would I think of leaving my house without brushing my mind? So I can see through this lens clear, right? That when hurting people hurt people, that when people are reactive, for me to hold presence and not be reactive. All of that takes free will. Most people are not operating with free will, Megan. Free will requires discipline because it requires you to be aware and have high emotional intelligence. So when I created the emotional healing system, I developed all 4 phases of the system based on the 4 phases of the skills of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management and regulation, social awareness, and relationship management. So once a person, most people are ignorant to this because we're not taught this in this country, and really anywhere around the world. IQ is valued, but EQ isn't. But really, it's our emotions that drive our behavior. So, developing high emotional intelligence, knowing how to manage emotion, knowing how to monitor yourself is paramount. It's the most important thing you can do. Research even shows that people who are emotionally intelligent, regardless of how much money they're making, they're happier. They're more at peace. And isn't that the end game anyway? We know money doesn't make us happy. We're going for it because we want security or peace. But if you have security and peace and you don't have the amount of money you think you should have, what's the difference, right? You achieved what it is you want. So.
Yeah. Oh, you are so, one of the things, and growing up for me, there was not space for emotions. And so when you don't practice it, you don't have a space, a container to learn it. I was talking to someone just the other day about effective communication and how that isn't even a taught skill, and how we're missing out in our education of the next generation, because it doesn't matter how smart you are. Like you're saying, if you can't have emotional intelligence, which is, I think, also the ability to communicate with others in this way that's respectful and has boundaries and all of these pieces, that we're going to continue this path of severe mental illness, depression, anxiety, suicide, drug and alcohol use, because it's all an attempt to find that peace that you're talking about. And it doesn't come natural. At least it didn't for me.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's, most people suffer, and these teachings go back 6,000 years. They predate, it's what Buddhism was extracted from. It's called Vedanta, which it means non-dualism. Avyanta is non-dualism, but Vedanta, it's the Vedas from India. It's what yoga came from. And it says we suffer because we don't know the nature of true reality. The nature of true reality is that you are not separate from the Creator. You are not a drop in the ocean. If the ocean is God, you are the entire ocean in the drop. So when we identify with our own divinity, with our perfection, with the part of us that the Creator created, then we get really intentional about why are we here? We have a purpose. We have a unique gift. And if we have healthy parents that understand this, then they raise us in a way that we find intrinsic worth, not related to how much money we have or how well we do in school or how we look or how we, I raised my daughter this way. She's raising my grandson that way. So I broke a cycle because my daughter knows she's inherently worthy regardless of what she does in the world or how she looks in the world. And this is how most people are conditioned as children. It's called, externalizing, right? So we look out into the world. Our parents do, oh, we got to look right. what will people think? Dress right, look right, do right. Oh, get good grades, because it reflects on us. So it all becomes this external persona, which is egoic. It's operating from the ego. And in our parents' defense, again, the consciousness of humanity is not very expanded. So what I mean when I say that is we don't know what we don't know. And we don't know a lot. Out of the known universe, we only know, they say, about 4%. So 96% is dark matter and dark energy, means we haven't even pierced into it. So when people get on their soapbox of I know, I mean, we're still evolving. And really the number one thing that we have learned as a human species in the 21st century is that we can expand our consciousness. And what is consciousness? It's everything you're aware of. If your consciousness is fearful and constricted and full of what will people think and always externalizing, then you're going to have a very chaotic mind, stress response constantly. Your body's going to break down because it's not meant to be in stress like that all the time. And, so you're going to attract situations, circumstances that constantly keep you externalizing, looking out. I always say, when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you think of? I ask my students that, and they'll say, oh, my to-do list, or, oh, what I got. And I have them retrain themselves to the first thing they do when they wake up in the morning is they go within. Intimacy. Think about the word into me, I see. So becoming intimate with self. I can't take credit for that. That came from Wayne Dyer. I love that too.
Okay.
Intimacy, into me, I see. So I look within, immediately I connect to my creator. Good morning, Father, Mother, God. Thank you for this day to live upon this earth. Thank you for, giving me this opportunity to serve and help and share my gifts and talents. Good morning, little Jana. How did you sleep? I love you. What would you like to wear today? What would you like to eat for breakfast? I begin immediately connecting with self, capital S, with my essence, right? Because I know the truth of reality. It all exists in here, not out there. That's not my source. My source is here. So as soon as we turn the lens of perception from the outer world back internal and feed ourselves everything we're wanting to get from the external world. For so many years, I wanted my mom to say, I'm so proud of you. What I didn't realize, no, I wanted to tell myself I was proud of myself.
Yeah.
I can control that. I can't control whether or not someone else tells me that. So once I started to give myself every words of affirmation, acts of service, quality time, gifts, everything, all the love languages to me, that's when little Jana and I just bonded. And I just came back from a trip. I have to tell you, this is how it looks. So I go away. I tell my husband, I'm going to go over to Arizona for a few days. I just need to spend some time with little Jana. I can feel there's a disconnect. I've been working a lot. I need to reconnect back with myself. So I go on this trip and I'm just having such a fun time. I get a massage, I go shopping, I go out to eat, and I come home the night back to the hotel the first night, and I'm looking in the mirror and I just, my vagus nerve fires, which that warm, fuzzy feeling, I just feel so much love. And I look in the mirror and I'm like, you're my best friend. Like, I love you. I like where you eat. I like where you shop. I like this hotel that you stayed at. I like everything you do. I just like being you. But that's that little girl inside. Yeah.
Wow. So encouraging, and just the compassion that if we can turn all of these things, like the affirmations, like you said, I mean, I love that, the 5 love languages, like turning them to yourself. And it reminds me, we cannot give what we can't receive. And so I know I spent so many years wanting to put out like the love and the connection, but it was never coming across in that way because it wasn't authentic, because I hadn't been able to even give that to me. And so until I had it, I couldn't really give it. And I had not been taught self-care. In fact, it was like, that's kind of selfish, right? You talked about the church and it's all about like giving and what are you doing for others? And I believe in doing things for others and giving and caretaking and all of those things, but not when it's at the expense of ourselves, because then it becomes harmful and you're not even doing it for the right reasons. You're not giving out of your excess. You're depleted, and really then you're not doing anyone a service, And
So Megan, let me say something. So you were saying I was giving out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yes.
you can't give what you can't give to yourself. That's not entirely true, because often we do it because we think we're going to get something in return. So it looks like it's selfless, which I hate that word because I don't want to be less of me, right?
Right.
And I'll tell you the distinction between selfish and self-responsible. So that's where you make the shift. Often selfish people are the ones telling you you're selfish because you're not doing what they want you to do. Now, it's the key word is consistent. If I consistently always put myself first, that's selfish. But if I tune in and listen to what's in my highest good, and sometimes maybe I've committed to something, and when I arrive there, it's not in my highest good to do that, I need to listen to that. I will. I always put my feelings first. Yeah. Because that's my responsibility. I'm responsible for me, not anyone else. But when you're giving to others to get, right, it's a part of the wounded child. It's, I want to get love, avoid pain, and feel safe. So we think we're such caregivers and we're so giving and generous, but we're really doing it with a hook. And then when we don't get what we need, or someone does say, oh, you're so amazing, you're so wonderful, but we can't receive it because we don't really care what people think. Often, I mean, for a long time, I operated, oh, I care what people think. Oh, I'm so like, what do they think of me? Oh, they're judging me. But you really don't, because think about when someone compliments you and you can't receive the compliment. There's a clear example. I don't care what they think, because if you did, you would receive it. It's so because you're not in agreement with it. I hadn't really
thought about that.
Right. You're not in agreement with it. But if they judge you, and maybe you judge yourself, then it hurts you and you think you care what they think. Really, it's still not them. It's you don't, you're judging yourself. So it always comes back to self. Yeah.
Right.
So
I think you're so articulate in saying what I was definitely like trying to say there, because it was like my giving was out of a need, not out of my abundance, not because I had given to myself and I felt good. And so I'm giving to others from this pure place. It was all about, and then you get disappointed, right? Because you have this expectation, or I wanted to hear something from that person and then they didn't do it, and then you're just crushed. And so being able to learn how to care and love myself and not feel, I just would feel yucky about taking time for myself. Like I'm a mom. You can't take time for yourself. And when I learned, like, oh my goodness, I'm such a better mom when I'm taking care of myself, because I'm not projecting my wounds. I did that for a really long time. If listeners listen to podcasts too, it's my son, he's going to be 21. And we talk about how hurt people. And at that moment, I didn't know better, so I couldn't do better, right? You were just talking about that and but then as I learned, and that's why it's so important that we do continually learn and grow, because then we have an opportunity to do something different. And, it sounds like for your daughter, you were able to offer her that from an early age because of where you had grown. For me, it wasn't until he was in out of high school almost, and that we were able to go back and repair our relationship. And he was also able to take his own personal responsibility, because you get to that age of accountability where, even though people have harmed you, you have a choice. And when he recognized, like, I'm not going to continue on this wounding either, it's been amazing to see how it's never too late to be able to repair these things when you're willing and you're disciplined and you do the work. And that was one of the things that he talked about, is the discipline. And I always thought, I'm such a disciplined person because I was an achiever. But that wasn't discipline. That was just doing something to get whatever that reward was that I wanted. And so now it's discipline is about yourself. And I love that you talk about that. And I didn't have boundaries, which again, the boundaries aren't for others. They're for me. Like, what is it that I'm willing to take out of this relationship or the situation I'm in, and listening to yourself, because our self will tell us that's not good for you, or that's not working, and honoring.
And what is
learning
that?
to honor
when you
yourself.
say ourself, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about my spirit. I'm talking about the voice inside of me that is saying, it could be a physical response sometimes for me. It may not be a knowing, but I'll say, oh, I'm feeling my heart racing. I'm feeling a kind of shorter breath. Now I take notice. What's going on?
That's your wise little one. That's your emotional self. That's the child.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So, and we would say the child is your spirit too, because at our essence, when we came into this world, we're pure, we're whole, we're not filled with false beliefs and experiences and stories of, so it's really one and the same, right? The soul, who we really are, but we're in these physical forms and we have an emotional reaction to things. And our emotions are the inner child. So our body is, very intelligent because it contains our heart. Right. And the Heart Math Institute, I've been a facilitator for quite a few years now, and they've done a lot of research about the heart. And so the heart picks up things way before the mind does. So that's why you feel it in your body. That's why somatic practices are important. That's why, books that are getting really popular, the body keeps score, cells have memory. You put a single cell in a petri dish near some bleach, say, it's going to move as far away from the bleach as it can. If we are not healing these traumas and they're still held in our body, cellular memory, they develop dis-ease. And that's what creates cancers and autoimmune disorders and all kinds of, ailments, is because there's an emotional component. And that emotional component has to be acknowledged, respected. You've got to go back and rescue yourself possibly from experiences that, like I did. I had an experience when I was living with my aunt, after my mom put a gun to my head and we were taken away from her and she's in a hospital. And one evening, I was wetting the bed because of the complex post-trauma that I had been through. I'm wetting the bed again. And, it's just a reaction from the abuse. And as I'm seeing a figure, and I thought it was like an angel came to visit me.
You paused for a minute and it got frozen on your screen. Can you go back? And you were saying you were talking about how you had wet the bed, but then you were going into something about what you had seen, and I didn't.
Yeah. So when I was living at my aunt's, I had began wetting the bed. And so one night, so I'm under all this trauma. One night, I see a woman standing at the door. And I remember thinking it's an angel or something, and I felt a lot of peace. Well, it wasn't until years later I was doing inner child work with John Bradshaw, and he took us through a hypnotherapy where I went back to that experience. That was what came to mind. I'd forgotten about it. I was already at this time 31 maybe, and I had forgotten about what had happened after the gun incident with my mother and all of that. And I remember it was me. It was the future Jana going to the past Jana. And now people might say, oh, that sounds crazy. But, again, we live in a very mysterious world. Maybe I did time travel. Maybe my future self did come into that room to let me know everything was going to be okay. Maybe it was an angel. I don't know. But I know at 31, I was aware that I was able to do that. And so, so much of what we're doing and what we're learning, if we can get out of the thinking mind and thinking that it has to look a certain way, right, then we can do deeper healing, because now we're not bound by, oh, that's not real. I facilitate breath work. People go through breath work. They have altered experiences, like they're on a hallucinogenic. Right. They see deceased loved ones. They see Jesus. They have profound experiences just by really oxygenating the body, and all the calcium starts moving, and the mind, you get out of your head. And so this is important in healing. This is why my husband and I created and do these retreats, is because it's psycho-spirituality. It's psychology, the best of psychology combined with spirituality, and a dose of science to validate a lot of what we're doing. So there's so much now, that we can do to heal. Writing Wise Little One, my whole intent was to show people, listen, if I went through what I went through, and not only did I heal, I used all of that, to use an overused metaphor, I made really sweet lemonade out of those lemons.
Oh, well, that is the whole idea behind It's Your Story to Tell, is to just allow people to find hope in other people's journey of what's possible. And so I am so thankful for you writing your book. It was so enjoyable to read, and I highly recommend it. And we will definitely put in the show notes how to get to your website, find your course, the information about what services and things you do with your retreats, and a link to be able to get the book. Once it is available, I will make sure that we promote that in July, so that
it is available on my website, Megan. So somebody could pre-order it right now, and it could be autographed and sent to them. It'll go live July 12th on Amazon, but it is available on my website. If somebody wanted an autographed copy, they could go to janawilson.com and order it there.
Awesome. And then you do retreats, is that correct?
I do. I have, I've been doing retreats since 2004. Kind of before retreats, I was like, oh, I want to go on a retreat. And there were really not any retreats back then. And I thought, I'm going to create a retreat business that I would want to go on. So I, started in 2004. Of course, it's grown and evolved, but it's emotional healing retreats. We've been doing 2 a year since the pandemic. We'll get back to 4 a year, which will be every quarter. We do East Coast, West Coast, and then usually 2 really destination spots like Hawaii or Costa Rica or, Europe or somewhere. The retreats are an immersive experience, the group retreats. I also lead private, but I'm usually booked 6 months to a year out on private. Wow. And that's where people come here to Santa Fe and stay at our healing center, and we work with them. A lot of people want that private experience. It's a very high-end, expensive retreat. So the group retreats are really accessible, and we just created a new online course, which is the group retreat, but it's online. So you're getting the same content, the same everything, and you have access to it for a lifetime. So we're excited about that too. That just launched.
Oh, that's so exciting. I love when there's different ways to engage with the material so that it's accessible to everyone. Because, when I needed emotional healing, I had little ones, so going on a retreat and things like that. But by being able to have something online that you could do at night when your kids are in bed is so amazing. Well, do you have any last words for our audience? I am really grateful for our time together, and even just reading your book and how it helped me to even think deeper about my own journey.
Well, I mean, I think, the most important thing we can do is learn to spend quality time with ourselves. If we can't sit in stillness with our own presence and source our own presence, we're always going to look outside of ourselves and be unhappy. So, to the listeners, I encourage, I do teach meditation. So if somebody wanted to learn meditation, they could definitely book that with me. I'm very passionate. I've taught over 1,000 students to meditate. I've been a teacher for 15 years with the Chopra Center. I trained with Deepak Chopra. And so you get a primordial sound mantra. And a lot of people, operate from false narratives around meditation. I'm supposed to quiet my mind. Actually, that's not true. That's a myth. The whole point of the practice is to be aware when you're lost in thought. So it's a superpower, and you can begin to really monitor where your mind is, because our mind obviously is creating our reality and our emotions. Yes. So we want to be able to master it and control it and not let it control us. So yeah, meditation is so important, and doing it first thing in the morning, thinking of it as spiritual hygiene, right? That you wouldn't think of leaving the house without getting dressed and brushing your hair and teeth. And I wouldn't think of leaving my home without sitting in stillness with myself, connecting with myself and connecting to spirit. It is clearing the perception when I go out into the world. So I'm more present, I'm more aware, I'm less distracted, I'm not multitasking. I have a lot more creativity and enthusiasm. So it is the number one thing. And if someone listening is not meditating, no matter what you learn, how many tools you have in your spiritual toolbox, you won't use them adequately and effectively because you won't be aware.
You won't even know when to use them, right?
Exactly.
Oh, good. Yeah, the self-awareness that I began to develop when I started integrating meditation. And I think, there's a lot of these things that we're talking about that, for me and the way I grew up in my religious upbringing, that made me think that they weren't good. And, so then it put this in this place where I had to work through that false belief, and I had to find out, is that true? And what does Jesus say about this stuff? Everything we're talking about, come to me like a little child. Well, let's talk about inner child, right?
Yes. Self-love,
so
all of it. Jesus taught it all. I don't know how it got so misconstrued, but it's all there.
I know. And those things that have gotten misconstrued are the things that then block us from becoming all we were created to be. So not engaging in those things is actually giving power to the darkness, in my opinion, because you are blocking yourself from all of this light and who Jesus wants us to become. So I'm so grateful that you have shared such knowledge with us, and so practical by, sharing your story and walking us through it. And then all that you've learned, just downloading it to us in this hour. I'm amazed at how much we were able to cover, and I will definitely, look forward to getting more information out about your book and your resources that people can find, because these are amazing skills and you have a really great background. I know I've learned a lot from you and could benefit from continuing to learn from you. So I'll be checking out your stuff too. So thank you so much for your time. Bless you and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Jana.
New podcasts every Friday. Listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you're ready to start your own transformation journey, visit www.itsyourstorytotell.com. This podcast is intended only for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. The purpose of this podcast is not to replace the counsel of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org.